Three, two, one. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoelGameDay.com. We are here live on a wonderful and fabulous Wednesday evening. It's even better this week because we have a former Seminole with us. Still a Seminole, kind of, but former, I guess you could say technically now. We've got former Florida State wide receiver star Pokey Wilson with us this evening. Pokey, we've been looking forward to this interview for now, I guess we can say a couple months. But welcome to Hear the Spear, and happy to have you on here this evening, my man.
What's up, everybody? I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So kind of go through a little bit the transition. You have the season ending, and now you're going through training. How has that been for you? Where have you been training at? Kind of what is your process? We just had Cam McDonald on last week, and he says he shuts off the phone at 8 o'clock and he's in bed. I don't know if I fully believe that, but how has the training been for you getting acclimated now and getting into the league and trying to figure that all out?
Everything has been pretty smooth or whatever. I had the little tropical bowl, and I've been training out in Miami at Bommarito. I've just been focusing on like trying to gain weight, get stronger and faster for real.
Is there a certain weight that you're trying to get to?
I was trying to get like 185 ish, but I got there, so I'm pretty good now.
Were you kind of around that range or less during the football season? Because I know guys will trim
Nah,
off weight naturally.
during the season I was more around like 175, like on and off. Might lose five, gain five. You know how it is during them practices and stuff.
For
I
sure.
was gonna say it's got to be a little bit different now. I don't know if you got any kind of tips from Coach Storms or not, but how was it being with Coach Storms and going through the strength and conditioning and continuing to try to put on size through your career?
Everything with Coach Storms, it was pretty much really fun. Like he pushed us real hard, but like the work we was doing was more fun, so we didn't look at it as work more than like having fun out there.
You mentioned the Tropical Bowl a couple of minutes ago. What was that experience like getting to compete against some other guys that are trying to get drafted? And, you in particular was named as one of the standouts during that time.
Uh, I think it was pretty fun out there in Orlando. I met a lot of dudes that I probably think I would never met before, and we competed hard. I talked to uh, almost all the scouts after practices and stuff.
How did that go, I guess? What kind of feedback did they give you?
Uh, they pretty much was saying like I look fast or whatever, and like they want me to gain some weight and things like that.
Were you? I was talking with somebody the other day. Were you one of the fastest guys you think last year? Because it showed J Trav really liked going to you deep. Y'all two connected very well. We saw that in fall camp. You guys, I was like, yeah, Pokey and deep ball with J Trav, get ready for 2022. And that's exactly what went through. But you think would you call yourself top three fastest?
Yeah, of course I'm always like if you ask anybody that they'll say themselves. Yeah.
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping you would say that because I got a lot of talk about with that LSU game and everything. But how is being out of college now? How does that feel? You've been through in Tallahassee and everything. How's that vibe been?
I mean, it really hasn't hit me for real, but it's hit me. Like I'm still trying to adjust to it because like I was in the training phase for real, and now I'm really focused on pro day and things.
Hmm.
Yeah, and Pro Day obviously going to be held at Florida State on Friday. What kind of things are you looking to display out there for NFL scouts?
I just want to display speed and my ability to track the ball and make these catches.
And obviously a place you're really familiar with, getting a chance to compete with some of your former teammates like Cam McDonald and some other guys like that on Friday. What's that experience like for you? Getting one last opportunity to step onto the field with those guys.
Well, I think I'm just more ready. I wasn't really thinking about it that way. I was just trying to like
Mm,
prepare mentally, like with everybody watching and stuff. I ain't want to just like think about I'm competing with my other teammates. I'm really trying to compete with myself.
for
Do you
sure.
know who will be throwing to you on Friday?
I ain't really sure to be honest right now.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That's always one of my question marks because you'll see in different pro days, different colleges that some quarterbacks will be throwing, some that are on the team that will play next season in college they'll be throwing. So was just wondering on that side of things. I want to jump back to this last season, which was massive. There's a lot of different storylines that I'd like to discuss. Let's start off. We all were there in New Orleans. Can you kind of take us through you guys traveling over there and you're going to that big stadium and then you've got the huge turnout of the Florida State fan base? Were you expecting something like that to see these FSU fans travel as well, competing very well with the LSU fan base in New Orleans?
Nah, I really wasn't expecting it. Like, I feel like we had more fans than they did, and like it was pretty much sold out. Like they had it rocking out there in the Caesar Dome for real.
It was a crazy atmosphere, and obviously you made a lot of plays that night. 7 catches, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, including that the trick play to kind of get things started there in the first half. What was you talked about playing in front of the sold out atmosphere, getting a chance to match up with LSU like that, and kind of like a neutral site environment. What was that moment like?
Uh, Really, I didn't know what to expect at first. Like it was being my first game of the season that I played because I missed the first game versus Duquesne.
Mhm.
So I was happy to be out there for real. And then when the plays came to me, I just made them.
Yeah, speaking of plays being made, we have it as a thumbnail here for the podcast tonight. But that one-handed grab, man, we were all the way up in the press box, which was way too high, crazy high. We were practically where the ceiling was, so we couldn't. We could see that you had the arm out and you came down with it, but then to see the images that came out with some of the photographers, and you had ESPN having a slow mo with it. Take us through that moment, the play, and everything. Was it fully designed for you to make that play? It seemed to be that way. J Trav also took a big hit.
Yeah, I knew it was coming to me when J Trap he kind of looked at me and nodded, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm finna get this one." So I seen that the dude was playing off man, and like I just ran as fast as I could for real. And J Trav just gave me the chance for real. Like I knew I was gonna catch it with one hand, but I just ain't know how I was gonna catch it. Cause and when the ball was in the air, he kind of grabbed my arm for real, and I was just like, I gotta have this one for real.
And
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was your IG afterwards? Like, I always wonder that about some athletes after they make a huge play. Like, your phone's got to be blown up. Definitely when you check back, like, and you win the game, but still, the IG had to have been popping.
Yeah, I had jumped up a couple thousand followers. Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying, man.
But obviously, one of those plays came off of a flea flicker, and we also saw Mike Norvell get a little creative later on in the season when Wyatt Rector ended up throwing that touchdown pass to Jordan Travis. I mean, what kind of trick plays have we not seen yet out of Mike Norvell?
I mean, almost every day at practice, we used to practice trick plays and 2-point plays. So it's plenty that y'all just haven't seen yet, but we've practiced them plenty of times.
I want to jump outside of that LSU game. Obviously, that gives y'all a nice jump. It seems like, okay, Florida State might be back. Heard from a couple of your former teammates saying that Florida State is ready to compete and play with the best and talent wise. I think for me that stood out was at Louisville, where you guys went up there. You have J Trav going down. You got Jared Verse going down. It felt like, I don't know, something bad, just bad juju overall. This was a night for where Florida State was supposed to lose this game, but y'all ended up responding and winning it. Tate Rodemaker goes out there, he does his thing, and Johnny Wilson too. Can you kind of take us through that night, because we really haven't been able to talk with someone yet that can really run us through what that locker room was at halftime, and then y'all going out there and performing that the way that y'all did.
I mean, honestly, nobody really like looked at it as like, oh, we finna lose this game or anything. It was just like we just gonna keep fighting to the end. So we kept fighting and ended up on top.
And a play that kind of went overlooked throughout the season in my mind was against North Carolina State. Towards the end of that first half, it was kind of like a special teams trick play, the punt return
Oh,
that went to you, and you brought it back 51 yards to set up a field goal at halftime. And, it kind of gets overlooked because you guys ended up losing that game, obviously. But I mean, same thing, these trick plays on special teams. Was that something that was designed, or did you guys see a formation that made you switch to that? I mean, how did that kind of work out?
Yeah, that's another play we had been practicing for a couple weeks or whatever, and like it was the design to where we make everybody chase Micah to one side, and like because we kind of knew where the kicker was supposed to kick the ball at
Mm-hmm.
by their formation, so we designed it where we gonna make everybody chase Micah and think he getting the ball, but really I'm finna go pick it up and I'm gonna have a lot of green to run with.
It was a brilliant play. I mean, for a second, I thought you were going to bring it back for a touchdown.
I should have done for real.
Okay, let's jump back even further. Let's go to where Florida State coach Dugans, you're bringing in 4 wide receiver transfers, Pokey, and you're one of those guys that decided to stick around, could have easily maybe entertained other places, and you stuck around and wanted to compete. And I think not only just compete, but you kind of help lead that team. Can you take us through that, and then your decision, obviously, to stay and do what you did this last season, and getting to know Johnny, Deuce, Micah, and Winston?
I mean, seeing the coach bring a lot of players in at your position could kind of get discouraging, but I ain't really look at it as that. I looked at it as like, uh, this my chance to compete for real. But as I got to know them and stuff, like all them, they pretty cool guys. All them got their own special talents on the field and stuff. And I'm glad they came because the room wouldn't have been the same if they never came.
Yeah, it really seemed to rise the level of competition, and it seemed like you took on a leadership role as well. So, just early on, when those guys were kind of transitioning to Florida State, getting to know the offense a little bit, building chemistry with Jordan, how were you kind of helping them out?
I mean, at first, Norvell, we got a kind of a complicated offensive playbook, so guys come and ask me to help them with plays and stuff, and we'll like go over plays and different ways to run routes and things. That's how we grew more as brothers in the receiver room than like we competing against each other. We compete with each other.
Hmm. Can you tell us about J Trav? When did you kind of get the feeling, this dude's special? Like there's something about him. When did that maybe hit you during your career at Florida State?
It was like I forget exactly what game it was, but it was one game. Jay Trout came in. He scored like 3 touchdowns or something. It was like, and we won too. Like he brought us back and we won. It was like, yeah, he might be something crazy for real.
Yeah,
And then just watching him develop more and more, he getting more scary every year.
And
yeah.
everyone sees what he does on the field, obviously, developing into a standout player across college football this past season. But how much has he grown? Has he grown as a leader, as well for you guys over the last couple of years?
Yeah, Jay Trav, he was more of like a lead by example type of dude, but now he's gotten more to where he's a vocal leader and like guys really it's easy to follow him. He's a pretty good leader.
Going on the other side of the ball, let's talk some defense here. We got to see him during this last spring camp and got to see what he brought to the team and the energy wise. Jared Verse, is he a guy that like to irritate you guys a little bit during practices? Because we were, Norvell allows us to see a majority of practices through the season, definitely through camp. So it gives us a great utilization to come on here and bring out some good coverage for you guys. But Jared Verse seemed like he was one that liked to, amp it up a little bit, even before practices, talking trash.
Yeah, he always talking trash. Like no matter where he at, he gonna be loud and talking trash. Like you know,
Was it
he's
good for
funny.
you guys though?
Yeah,
Like competitive
yeah.
wise, did it kind of up it up a little bit?
Yes, sir. Him coming in, like he was a really high motor guy in practice and stuff. It's just making the O line step up more.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you about two younger guys on the roster that it looks like they're going to play bigger roles for Florida State in 2023, and that's Darion Williamson and also Kentron. They've made some plays early on in their careers, but trying to maybe be a little bit more consistent now moving forward. So, just what are some of your thoughts on them after working with them the last couple of years?
Yeah, Darian and Tron, they always been pretty, like they always show flashes of what they can do, but I feel like this year probably is gonna really be the year for both of them to just go out there and take off for real.
I want to talk Winston right here too. He's a guy that's been available during camp, making plays. On Saturday caught a touchdown pass from AJ Duffy. Uh, you know, what about him makes him special? Because I keep, whenever I'm discussing with Ron Dugans, he talks about his heart and the guy that will work hard, put his head down, and grind. What kind of stood out to you early on building your relationship with Winston?
I mean, with the injury that he went through and just watching him be able to come and work every day and show up to treatment and recovery every day and still come to practice and clap us on, like, it's hard to go through that and still have the motivation to just want to still be out there with us. So, like, I really salute him for that because I've been through an injury too, and, like, that can really bring you down sometimes.
I wanted to ask about Coach Dugans. What's it been like learning for him over the last couple of years? Obviously, you were able to play with or learn under him for 4 years, and you led FSU in receiving in 2020 and 21. Just put together a really good senior season as well. So, what was it like learning from him, and what's that relationship like?
Being able to learn from someone who played here and like kind of show me the ropes. Like we built a very close relationship. Like I went and talked to him today. We had a great conversation. Like he said he always saw something in me, but and like he always wanted me to wear his number when I tried to change my numbers or something. He'd be like, "This is a legendary number. You got to keep it." Or whatever.
That's huge, man. I think that's something special. I mean, it seems like y'all had a good bond, and that's something Ron Dugans is. We've heard from him multiple times about how close he gets with his wide receivers. I go back and thinking, Lawrence Dossie, former FSU wide receivers coach, that also had really close relationships with his players. Like Dustin was talking about, Kentron Portier, he had one of his biggest days yesterday, coming down with a nice grab. What do you think future wise for this team going into this next season with this offense in particular? You're adding in Jaheim Bell, the South Carolina transfer tight end. You also have Kyle Morlock. You're still sticking with Jordan Travis. You still got Trey Benson. You've got Lawrence Toafili. You've got Johnny Wilson and the wide receiver group out there. What do you think this offense has potential wise for next season? Because we saw the capabilities that it had last year, but now I just feel like it's gotten stronger, and definitely looking at the offensive line and what Coach Atkins is doing.
I mean, I feel like they got the potential to win it all. Like we just got so many weapons, we can hit you anywhere, anytime, for real, when everything's just falling in the right place.
I kind of wanted to go all the way back because you spent 6 years at Florida State. Originally signed with FSU in that 2017 class out of Turner County. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you mostly played defensive back in high school, and obviously ended up switching to receiver once you did get to Tallahassee. But you kind of came alongside Tamorion Terry in that 2017 class. I believe you didn't get the offer until January of that year when you signed in February. So I guess just going back a little bit, can you take us through that story, how it all got started with Florida State?
I think one they came to like a basketball game or some, and like they was watching us, and then I think maybe like a month or two after that they came back and they sat down with us and they was like they're offering me, and I was just like so surprised. I was like, I'm going down on the spot, like I was gonna commit or whatever. But I played, yeah, I played corner leading up to it, and in my first year I redshirted at corner, down ended up switching to receiver because we was like lower receivers that was on scholarship that spring or something, and it just turned out pretty good for me. I guess you could say that.
Yeah, you
Yeah, I
can
think so.
can't say that a little bit, but you talked about it briefly, but you're a guy who's went through some adversity, having to play under three head coaches, multiple offensive coordinators. I guess through the whole 6 years, all these different switches and everything, why did you decide to stick with Florida State?
I mean, I just felt like it was home here. Everybody have their thoughts about maybe thinking about transferring and stuff, but I really thought that I can just stick it out here. I've been here long enough. Maybe I just stick it out one more year. And everything that God has for me is gonna happen.
Let's talk about your former head coach, Mike Norvell. I'm sure you've seen him since getting back in Tallahassee. What was it like playing for Mike Norvell to you? Because we had Cam McDonald on last week talk about his high energy. Jamie also saying, he feels like he's crazy. Like, where's the caffeine coming from and everything? And Cam said Coach Norvell told him that he doesn't have any caffeine, doesn't drink any caffeine. Not sure if you believe that, Pokey, but just overall, what was your time like playing for Coach Norvell? Can you tell us a little bit about him?
I mean, it was a great time playing for him. He's a hard coach, but he always had the same energy anytime. So like, it's not like you're not expecting it or something. It could be 5 in the morning, he's yelling and up like "Good morning." Like, you just know what to expect with him every time, every day. He's very consistent. I
You think
enjoy playing for him.
you think it was a little bit harder on you guys since he played wide receiver in college?
Yeah, he was definitely hard on the receivers, and we ran the most in practice, and he ain't cared. Like, he gonna tell it, we need to run full speed, run faster, all this. It was fun, though. He talk his junk.
Yeah. I was going to ask you too. This is going to be the toughest question of the night, but favorite food spot in Tallahassee? Favorite food spot, if you could pick right now, where would you go in Tally?
I mean, one of my favorite go-tos is Guthrie's. Like, you can never go wrong with Guthrie's,
Mm-hmm.
but I also like Burrito Border. That's like one of my
Mm,
favorites, and Hip Hop Chicken. That's another good one.
okay.
And like Munchies Pizza, that's a good one.
Let's get out. Now, boneless or bone in for wings? This might be the.
Jesus.
I'm trying to get a trend here.
Bone in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Pokey. I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you. I want to go back to Orlando and y'all getting that 10th win. We've had a few former guys come on here. Jamie talked about Cam. That 10 wins was huge to you guys. And y'all were talking about it a ton after practices and when we were interviewing y'all. What did that mean specifically to you? Because I look back at Cam and, it meant a ton. Y'all both riding together throughout y'all's career at Florida State. What did it mean specifically to you to get that 10 win and add on to the list of a couple of teams that have been able to do that?
I mean, being my last year playing here at FSU and having a 10-win season, being able to go out with a bang, it was just special for me. Cause like being there, I got there when we was like coming down off of being a very good team, and I went through the ups and then the downs and the ups, and then be able to end off on the up just felt really good.
How big was it for you? Because I believe it was the first time during your college career, this 2022 season, for you guys to defeat both Florida and Miami in the same year. So just to end your career, not only with a Cheez It Bowl, but also, taking down two of Florida State's primary rivals. How important was that?
Yeah, that was nice too. We actually had got balls for that, saying like the state championship, and I think we was supposed to get rings also
Mm-hmm.
because we won like the state of Florida.
Got to make sure they get those to you.
Yeah, where they at? Where they at? Which one did you like playing against the most? Was there anyone that you didn't like more, or are they the same?
I think I disliked Florida more, and then like I like playing against Miami more. Like, you feel
Mm-hmm.
me?
What was the vibe like or not in the locker room, but on the sideline whenever y'all were torching Miami? Let's be honest here. I mean, that I haven't been able to cover a game like that for Florida State in a while, definitely against a rival where I'm just kind of just sitting there like this thing is overdog and we're at the halftime mark. But just how was it on the sideline for you guys?
Like, everybody was just having fun for real. Like, we watching the stadium like empty, like slowly, like all they fans leaving and all our fans still here. But it was fun. It was a good time.
And I guess with that, going to the Florida game, seeing the fans rush the field, rush Doak Campbell Stadium after you guys beat the Gators, something that hadn't happened in, quite some time. What were you thinking just seeing all those people flood onto the field?
I I literally took so many pictures I couldn't even count. Like I was kind of stuck on the field between so many people, and I couldn't get off. Like I never seen dope get flooded before. That was a great experience though.
And I've got to ask, I think the only other guy on the team this past season that had been there since 2017 was Leonard Warner. So, I mean, going through the years with him, what was their relationship like with him, another guy that had been at Florida State for a while?
Me and Leonard, we was real cool and close. Both of us being from Georgia, but we always talked about like how much everything has changed and like everybody gone. We the last ones here. We gotta hold it down and stuff like that.
Pokey, there's Troop here on YouTube asking, how was it growing up in South Georgia for you?
For me, I grew up in like the country, so it really wasn't much to do besides play sports for real.
I was going to say it's not much of a crazy change going from South Georgia down to Tallahassee. I would say
Yeah.
scenery wise, not much of a difference. Not much of a difference there. I've only got one or two left. I'm going to jump into this upcoming season for FSU. Who do you think we should maybe start keeping an eye on? Some guys from last year, maybe some younger guys. I know we've already talked about Kentron Portier, but even outside of your unit, you're a wide receiver, so you're going against DBs all the damn time. Is there anybody that, across that team and that board that we should probably be keeping a close eye on going into that 2023 season?
You saying receiver wise or
It can be a receiver or it can be a DB, someone that gave you a hard time. We've been hearing good things about Greedy Vance and spring camp right now.
I'll say at receiver, of course, Tron, Johnny, Winston, and Deuce and Darian, and then at corner, I used to compete the most with is probably Renardo and Greedy all the time. Though they're gonna be pretty standout players.
I wanted to ask, obviously we've talked about it, but you spent a long time at Florida State. So, I mean, just looking back at your career, are there any specific memories that you're going to look back on, 10, 20 years from now that you're really just going to cherish?
Uh, One of my favorite memories was like my first touchdown versus NC State. I think I'm always remember that. And then of course a 10-win season. I'm remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've got one last one, and sadly, it's not going to be the most important one, but to me it is, and maybe some of our listeners. Since you're a veteran guy, you went through and had this career at Florida State, you have the most intel with this answer, I think. Best uniform combination, Pokey. I need to know it because I know, y'all take the photo shoots and everything, but if favorite one.
I'm gonna have to go with like the all white with the white helmets or either all black with the black helmets.
See, that's what they need to be. Yeah, I like that combo.
Yeah, I guess just to end it off, one thing, I know we talked about Coach Dugans earlier, and I'm not sure how much you were looking at social media during your time at Florida State, but he was a guy that got a lot of criticism leading up to the 2022 season because of the wide receivers and stuff. But then it really changed this past year with you and some of the transfers coming in and some of the young guys as well starting to step up and develop. So I mean, I guess just to see him prove everyone wrong, what does that mean to you? And, what does it say about what he's doing at Florida State?
I was just happy to be a part and be able to help him show everybody that like we really got a receiver room over here. We just haven't been able to show up.
I like asking this, and we'll let you go after this. I always like asking guys before they're going into pro day, getting ready for the draft and everything that comes with it. You watch the NFL. Which offense or which team do you think you would fit best with your talents? Because I know we were talking the production meeting. You've got that speed and everything, and I can already come off a couple teams in my head of where you would be able to utilize your talents at. But which team specifically, if there's one that stands out to you, Pokey, where you think you fit the most?
I mean, I ain't really got nobody specific, but I probably like fit somewhere like the Chiefs or like the Dolphins or something like that.
This is literally the two teams I was thinking of, so that works out perfectly. I think you're a talented guy. You represented Florida State very well. You're definitely a fan favorite here, and it was a pleasure to have you on the show with us. And we're looking forward to continuing to cover you throughout your career once you get to the next level. So appreciate you. Wish you the best of luck on Pro Day on Friday. Healthy as all get out moving forward. So, Pokey, appreciate you hopping on here the Spear with us this evening.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man.
Well, that was a great interview there with former FSU wide receiver Pokey Wilson. VZ, Austin asked all the hard-hitting questions for us, so you allowed me and Dustin to relax.
I was going to bring up the Miami game, and then y'all brought it up as soon as I was going to say something. So I was like, okay.
You could have hopped in there and interjected your point.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't give me the chance. It's okay.
A good little interruption, I wouldn't have mind. It'd been fine with me.
It's all good.
No problem. That's okay, though. Thank you for allowing me and Dustin to get our shine and time there on the show. But, yeah, good stuff there from Pokey. I thought it was good of him talking about Renardo and Greedy, those two guys going to be standouts in this next season and showing right now in camp, I believe, so far.
Yeah, both those guys have looked pretty good so far. And obviously mentioning Kentron, who I would say has potentially been the most consistent, well, right up there with All-Day Dre, one of the most consistent wide receivers through the first half of camp. I mean, it's been a pretty interesting one so far for Florida State, especially at the skill positions. I mean, you're seeing so much competition. And I mean, you can say the same thing about the offensive and defensive line. This has been a very competitive camp for Florida State. It's gotten chippy at sometimes. I think that's for the betterment of the team.
100%. And that's what we're going to talk about here in just a few. But before we do that, let me go ahead and run through some other crap that I always need to go through. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, we would definitely appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe. It allows for this video to get out there to some more FSU fans. Y'all really smacked the like button on our last video, so that helped bring up the views and allows for a lot more commentators to come on here and bring up some good comments. So appreciate everybody tuning in to last week's podcast. But let's start jumping into some quick hitters of the week, and then we'll get into some scrimmage scoop and practice observations. Florida State lost a starting defensive end yesterday on Tuesday with veteran defensive player Derek McClendon. This was something that didn't shock anybody at this time of this week because there had been some rumors and some chatter going around also not viewing him at a few of Florida State events, stirred it up even more. But Florida State is going to lose one of their defensive ends on the opposite side of Jared Verse. What's your take on this one, D-Lou? I think FSU fans, it's a mix of it's not a nightmare, nor is it a great situation where you're trying to shut off some guys off of the scholarship account. To me, this isn't, we weren't expecting this going into spring camp. We were expecting to see Derek McClendon play this next year. And I have my take on it, but D'Lo, your first reaction.
Definitely unexpected. Like you said, I don't think this was anything that Florida State was considering going into the spring. We just heard Derek McClendon speak to the media the first Friday of camp, after practice 3, the first time they were in full pads. And then Florida State went on that spring break. And whenever they came back to practice, Derek McClendon was not with the team. We couldn't say that at the time because we're not allowed to report on availability and stuff for players. But now that he's no longer with the team, I think it's important to bring up that he hasn't been around now, for over a week leading up to his departure from Florida State. And it just really depends how you look at it, because obviously Jared Verse is coming back for another year. He's been looking terrific in spring camp so far, better than last year, which could be scary for college football. Across from him, you've got Patrick Payton, the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year, who, despite playing less snaps than Derek McClendon, had a better statistical performance than him last year. And I think you're just thinking Payton is going to continue to grow. He was only 2 years into the program, whereas McClendon was at year 4 last year. And then you've got a guy coming in from South Carolina who started to break out in 2022, and Gilbert Edmond, who has started to assimilate himself well, and Byron Turner, a youngster coming up, a guy who has been set back by injuries but has some real athletic talents and seems like he could develop into something at Florida State. Maybe not starter level this year, but someone that could get into the back end of that rotation. So, I think Derek McClendon just saw that maybe he didn't have a clear chance or a clear starting role in spring practice. He was going to really have to compete with those guys, Patrick Payton and Gilbert Edmond in particular, after starting 12 games a season ago. And, instead he's going to look for an opportunity where he knows what he's going to get out of the gate.
And it's coming on the heels of rumors, or not rumors, but reports that Patrick Payton's the most improved guy on the roster this spring. He's just the flash he's been showing coming off of last season. It makes sense from McClendon's point of view, but at the same time, you don't want to lose that kind of depth. It's going to be interesting to see if a guy like Byron Turner can break in that 4-man rotation because, it's good to have 3 pass rushers with Edmond, Payton, and Verse, but you want one more guy there just in case of injury, and hopefully it doesn't get there, but it's a big loss for depth.
That's the potential issue now for Florida State with Derek McClendon heading on out, that depth issue, because you've got 3 guys who are essentially proven in Verse, Payton, and Edmond. We're gonna see how things go for Turner here throughout the rest of the spring camp and obviously over the summer and everything. But then you look at the defensive tackle unit, and you've got a guy like Dennis Briggs who's been flexing between D tackle and D end over the last couple of years at Florida State, so he's got some experience on the outside. Braden Fisk, it seems like he's got the capability to play some defensive end as well. So I think it's really going to be a situational thing for Florida State. And at some point, we'll see some of these guys who are playing the 3 technique flex to the outside to help FSU out at defensive end. And I mean, we might even see some things where FSU goes 3 defensive tackles on the field. They're really going to have to stretch the depth in that defensive line room. And I think it helps that you've got so many capable bodies on that interior.
Yeah, going to the beginning of the discussion, this was a shock to us. Boots on the ground, everybody, the outlets covering Florida State. We weren't expecting this to be the cause. Gilbert Edmond coming in, oh my God, someone's got to go. Who's it gonna be? That never was a thought process for us. And I think things internally happen, miscommunication maybe, and then there's playing time. But the thing to me is Derek McClendon was going to play a lot of football for Florida State next season. Yeah. I mean, that was just going to be the case. And the good part about having Derek McClendon on your team, he was a guy that was able to stay healthy, and that he was going to be able to trot out there on Saturdays. But, he's not at the magnitude talent-wise of a Jared Verse. But this is what happens now. And I, wishing Derek McClendon the best. He was one of my favorite guys to interview at Florida State, and, interested to see where his next opportunity is going to be. But, this is kind of the standard now at Florida State where, Mike Norvell, he's going to bring in guys. And if you're not willing to just go ahead and compete and keep your spot or whatever it is, I think there was not even more of playing time as much, but more of just recognition. And that to me is just a personal thing that if you're on a football team and what Mike Norvell is trying to change culture-wise, that's just not going to fit. I'm sorry. That just not going to work in what Mike Norvell is trying to do to change that locker room. It's about the opposite of what Mike is wanting to have and the more in their locker room right now. So, I don't think it's a nightmare, nor do I think it's a great thing. We're going to have to see some guys step up like Byron Turner. I think he's got to make that next jump. There's flashes here and there, but he hasn't hit that magnitude of what Pat Payton hit this last spring. He's got more work to do. I'm keeping my close eye on Gilbert Edmond. Looking at him in practices, I thought he moves. I think he's the most athletic one in that room, in my opinion. And we'll just see how he works into the scheme wise, Dustin. But we've been able to see him. You're now seeing him every day almost. He's got a skill set, and just interested to see where Florida State's going to utilize him at.
For sure. And I mean, I don't want to mitigate the loss of McClendon because this was a guy that started last year, has really done his part over the last couple of years to develop himself into someone that could play a role on Florida State's defense a year ago. And I mean, at the very least was going to be a high contributor for FSU off the bench this season as part of that 4-man defensive end rotation. But I think when you're seeing this, when you've got a guy that's being developed like Patrick Payton, and you got a guy out of the transfer portal like Jared Verse last year and Edmond this year, I mean, that just says to me that Florida State is going in the right direction. It sucks that McClendon, who's been here for 4 years, got passed up. But, I mean, when you look at those other 3 guys, the potential there for what they're going to be able to do on the field in 2023 is obviously a lot higher than maybe what McClendon can offer Florida State. So, to me, that just says the program's getting in higher quality players that have higher ceilings that are going to get Florida State to success quicker.
Well, we'll continue to see and, evaluate some of these guys that are going to have to take that next step in the room. There's definitely some youngsters in there, but, I'm not looking at Lamont Green. I'm not looking at Boots Jr. to jump in and see playing time as much in 2023. So, I'm looking straight at you, Edmund, looking straight at you, Byron Turner. I got to see it. And no, it's great to hear from Mike Norvell talking about, like VZ said, with Pat Payton. They've been naming him the most improved player this spring, and that's huge for Florida State. And definitely if you're going to be losing your starter on the other side. So we'll see what ends up happening. And I think it's time for guys to take that next step. And it's plain and simple now. And I'm sure Mike Norvell has told them that.
Yep. And also just don't forget the transfer portal, because it is hard to find a coveted edge rusher in the transfer portal, especially with how they're doing it now with the windows. I think the spring window is only going to be 15 days or so for players to be able to declare their intentions to enter the portal. They can still join a program outside of that window, but they've got to declare while they're in that window, unless they're a grad transfer like McClendon, who can enter the portal right now. It's still a little confusing, still trying to grasp it all together. So, but Florida State, depending on what happens here the rest of spring practice, they could potentially kick the tires on a couple of guys that are in the portal, explore their options. But you've got to remember, I mean, they're probably looking for someone to come in as a part of that rotation rather than someone just coming in to take a starting spot. It seems like it's going to be hard to supplant a guy like Jared Verse and also Patrick Payton, who's coming on extremely strong.
Florida State wrapped up.
Nailed it. Sorry. Right as I said it.
You nailed it?
I said that right as Tom submitted that. So it's honestly beautiful.
Beautiful. Perfect. Florida State wrapped up their first scrimmage of spring ball on Saturday morning. D-Lou, we heard from Mike Norvell along with Florida State's top assistants afterwards. Overall, the vibe and everything, if you guys are in our Discord, you got a lot of scoop and nuggets from that. And, listening to Mike Norvell afterward, talking about a few of the players, including AJ Duffy, who had probably the best quarterback on the field on Saturday. Also, Rodney Hill, Vandravius Jacobs continuing to do his thing, and then Winston Wright catching that touchdown pass. I think this is exactly what Mike wanted to see, at least when he was specifically talking about Rodney Hill. Let's start off there with Hill, because D-Lou, you've been high on him since the beginning, him coming on, putting on some size since arriving at Florida State this last year. I think what Mike specifically was trying to tell us, he really wanted to test Rodney Hill in this scrimmage and run him, give him a lot of opportunities to see how he was going to understand the playbook, and also, what kind of defensive schemes he was going to go against and the holes that he was needing to hit. But to see the strides, over 100 yards rushing from what I was told, multiple touchdowns, have a day, man, have a day. And we see the flashes in practice, Dustin, but whenever you see it in a scrimmage going against Florida State's defensive line that has been showing out so far in camp, it's a wonderful sign, but almost a harder thing for Coach Yak and Mike Norvell to figure out their running back room going into 2023.
Rodney Hill primed for a breakout campaign this upcoming fall, right there in the battle to replace Treshaun Ward in the rotation alongside Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili. And one thing that's interesting to me, and, Logan, me and you saw it last year in the fall, but Rodney Hill, he's always live contact. He doesn't get a green jersey like Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili normally wear green. So that means basically as soon as the defense touches him during team drills, the whistle's blown, the play's dead. They're not really taking a lot of contact. But then you've got a guy like Rodney Hill who's out there, and, he's allowed to be hit, taken to the ground. So he's used to it when you get him into a real live scenario in one of these competitive scrimmages. And also a guy going into his second spring now at Florida State, he's getting more comfortable in this offense. You mentioned he's putting on weight. He's getting better in that strength and conditioning program. I mean, he's doing everything that you want to see out of maybe the next running back that breaks out under Mike Norvell.
Which you love to see it definitely in that running back room where production is always heavy in Mike Norvell's offense. Let's jump over to AJ Duffy, which that was one of our conversations on here, guys, when we were going through our previews for the spring. We need to see AJ Duffy have that jump there. And it seems like it's headed in that direction. And definitely whenever you're hearing, scoop from scrimmages and him making plays, putting balls on the money, and able to go down and have scoring drives. Him to have a day like that is definitely impressive for Florida State. Rodemaker having an up and down day. You also have Brock Glenn in there too, a true freshman, from which I was told, it was a true freshman day. I know Mike Norvell giving some praise to him and some different ways, but that was still want to emphasize that was a true freshman going against a lot of good players definitely on the defensive side of the ball. So there was a wake-up call a few times. But overall, the best quarterback on the field on Saturday morning was A.J. Duffy.
I think it's big for AJ and his confidence kind of moving forward, because we've seen him during practice last year in particular, really struggle at times, whether it's, making the correct read or just doing something and then drawing the ire of Mike Norvell or Tony Tokars, and having discussions with Jordan Travis. So I think this sophomore season, we've discussed it a lot. This is huge for him with Brock Glenn right there breathing down his heels. I believe Glenn is still the only quarterback who's yet to throw an interception so far through spring camp. And, obviously he may be working against more of the reserves and maybe a guy like Jordan Travis, but to me, that still says something about his ability to take care of the football. I think he did throw one during the scrimmage on Saturday, but it was called back due to a penalty. So it's huge for A.J. Duffy to have another guy who's really close in years to him. Brock Glenn only 1 year behind, to be there on his heels and pushing him. And I think it's bringing the best out of Duffy so far. We've talked about it before. He came into spring camp in really good shape. He's still having some good moments during practices, but I think it's just more about the consistency now, doing it rep by rep instead of a couple times at practice. And he's slowly getting there, and we're just going to have to continue to see how it goes as he competes with Tate Rodemaker for that backup job.
One thing that I think is great for Duffy, it's Brock Glenn, and you can bring in a freshman quarterback. That's fine. Cool. You have that in there in your room, and yeah, you got competition. But I think the work ethic that Brock Glenn has came in with, that competitive energy, him also being an early leader, we saw that in just tour of duty. He's picking up, was it Jeremiah Byers? He's over here trying to get Keandre Jones, Auburn offensive line transfer. He's trying to get him to, stay energetic, to kind of go through the drills and everything. To see that from a true freshman and talking to some of these older guys like that, AJ Duffy's hearing that. Absolutely. And so that's going to put someone, who's on your heels type deal, obviously, ways ahead, I think, too, in a lot of different ways. But still, just to see Brock Glenn coming in with that attitude has got to be good for AJ Duffy to continue to push him and not allow him to be settled. That's something Mike Norvell does not like. He does not want these guys to feel comfortable. And that's just not how it's going to work, definitely in any kind of camp, specifically spring. And most importantly, just a few notes here that I have to Fabian Lovett being Fabian Lovett, having a nice day, disrupting. I know he got a sack, and Mike Norvell absolutely loved it, laying down some hits. Anything else that really stood out to you, Dustin, whenever we were getting some intel from that spring camp that you're like, okay, something to keep an eye on? I know we keep on talking about Rendravius Jacobs, and we'll probably talk about him here in the observations, but he's a kid that is on a stride right now of consistency. And you look at Hakeem Williams, where he has his flashes, ups and downs, but that's still a freshman coming into a system. It's just Rendravius Jacobs is kind of on a roll right now. But once again, he impressed, and it happened to be in his first scrimmage as a college wide receiver.
I believe he got a touchdown, right?
Yep, sure did.
Not a bad.
Really impressive catch, too. Really, really impressive catch.
He's been showing up day by day. Even yesterday on Tuesday, you had him go up and make an insane catch at one-on-ones. He had a DB pulling on the back. He was pulling away on a deep route. The DB saw that he was getting free, yanked on the back of his jersey. Ref threw out the flag for pass interference immediately. And, despite that, Dre comes down with an insanely acrobatic catch. If Kentron Poitier wouldn't have made an even better one a couple of minutes later, that probably would have been the play of the day at practice yesterday. But I would say another thing that stood out to me during the scrimmage is there was some real defensive dominance at times. Going back, through what we were told, Florida State's defense recorded, looked like at least 8 sacks on the day. Byron Turner and Lamont Green Jr. were two of those guys to come away with sacks. I mean, it's just been the story of the first half of camp, I feel like, is Florida State's talent on the defensive line. And, I mentioned earlier, particularly the interior of that defensive line, there's really 6 to 8 guys that I think could push for playing time in 2023. And you're starting to see some of those guys like Patrick Payton come on really strong and consistently off the edge. And that really just makes for a mismatch against Florida State's offensive line. We're still seeing some really good battles, but as both sides go deeper into their respective units, the defensive line is definitely winning. Or, when you go first team defense against second team or third team offense, you can tell there's a little bit of a gap between the two.
Just to end it off, a guy also having a big day who had a 50-plus yard touchdown run, over 100 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns on the day, CJ Campbell. I think it's going to be hard for Florida State to keep him off the field. We talked Rodney Hill earlier. You got to add in CJ Campbell too. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if CJ Campbell didn't have that injury last year, he would have been playing quite a bit for FSU last season. First, great day. I mean, he did this kind of last year. He's one of the Spring of the Kings type of guys, just like Trayshawn Ward was.
Spring of the King?
Spring King of the. I said King of the Spring.
That's not what you said.
Spring of the King.
No, you definitely said Spring of the Kings.
Spring of the Kings. He's one of the Spring of the Kings guys out there. But no, I think it's gonna be tough to get CJ Campbell off the field. I don't know how Coach Yak is gonna do it. You got Trey Benson, Rodney Hill, and then you're just gonna forget about Lawrence to Philly. I don't know. They're in a tough spot, in my opinion. I'll be interested to see what happens after this spring, and there is going to be some attrition with this guy, with some of this team. I don't know. I just think CJ Campbell's ultra talented. I think he's Florida State's best pass catcher out of the backfield. I know a lot of people say.
It's funny you say that, because right here in our notes we have, but he also dropped a pass that would have gone for a big play.
Was that in the scrimmage?
Yeah, that was in the scrimmage.
I think his 100-yard day.
We got that right here in our notes. It said it would have gone for 30-plus yards, but he dropped it.
Oh, crap. He couldn't get 130 yards.
I was just going to bring up that he scored 2 touchdowns, but that he needs to be a better receiver.
Dustin Lewis hates CJ Campbell. Make sure y'all clip it and put it on there. CJ Campbell's super impressive. Like, if you were looking, just because he's not a scholarship player, or at least that we haven't been told, since it never becomes public until we specifically ask. But CJ Campbell, if you looked at him, you would say top 2. Just impressive wise, the guy that how he practices and everything. That dude is crisp. He looks good when he runs, and he's a great pass catcher. I think he's the best in Florida State's backfield.
I will again refer to the note that we have here. But anyway, CJ Campbell, last year, whenever we were watching him during the offseason, spring practice, and fall camp before he got injured, it really seemed like he was going to be the next Trayshawn Ward story. Walk on to scholarship player who goes on to have some extreme success at Florida State. And I mean, that's still a possibility. I agree. He's been one of the backs that's been pretty good in camp so far. Also one of the guys who's live. So, you get to see him actually go up against contact. We've also wrote down here, Isaiah Holmes had a couple flashes in the scrimmage as well. So, I mean, Florida State's backfield, once again, despite losing Ward, who has been a very consistent contributor for Florida State over the past 2 seasons, the backfield's still primed to have a lot of success in 2023. And honestly, that's without seeing a ton of live reps from Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili so far. I think you're muted, buddy. It got real quiet.
Oh, well, I wish VZ would jump in there and give us a little scoop from his point of view. But
what are you going to say? Can CJ Campbell dunk?
He went 2 weeks off. We got to use that voice, VZ. 2 weeks off.
Well, I mean, satellite can't be at practice. I'm sorry.
I'm not at him. I'm just going. I read off of Dustin's observations now. I ask a couple people, maybe a little bit more details, but Dustin, he's not reading your articles.
You're not reading them either. I don't believe.
That's my point.
Well, maybe I don't need them. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough to get CJ Campbell off that field in 2023. So we'll see what Coach Yak and Florida State's going to do with them there. Let's go through some observations here, and then we'll get 2-minute basketball talk, and then we're out of here. Observations from Tuesday's practice, Dustin. It was a rainy one, but I love Jared Verse. You know, I can't wait to get him back on here because I was giving him all of his roses, and I gave him way too early, and I bought the stock at the low end, and it rose so fast, and now I feel like I'm a multimillionaire off of it, Dustin, I'll be honest with you. But Jared Verse, rainy day, you know what he does? He brings energy. You know, I think he knew guys didn't want to practice. Crappy day out. No one wants to be out there whatsoever. But what does he do? He makes it a little bit chippy, brings the energy, and the practice ends up being better than maybe what they had imagined or thought it would be. And you get some good competition. You get some good battles. Jaheim Bell versus Jared Verse. Can you take us through? Let's start off with the good stuff first. Let's start off in the trenches. D-Lou, can you tell us about Jared Verse and Jaheim Bell? When went down? What went down? Give us the scoop.
So I got to kind of create the picture here, but so obviously different periods are in practice. Florida State, whenever they do kind of like individual periods, at some point they'll have the offensive line and the defensive line match up for kind of like run blocking drills. It's like 3 offensive linemen against 2 defensive linemen, or you'll have 3 offensive linemen and a tight end go against 2 defensive linemen and a linebacker. So it got to that point where towards the end of the drills, they had the tight ends and linebackers come up and get involved. They were all going at it. You had Jaheim Bell matched up against true freshman Lamont Green Jr. And Bell drove back Green Jr. a little bit during the first rep, and might have said a little something extra to him, pushed him through the whistle. Regardless, there was a little bit of chippiness there. Maybe a couple shoves back and forth. And then Jared Verse steps in, and it seemed like he didn't like Bell going at his true freshman defensive end over there, and he pretty much told him, line up against me. And I was watching, from about 10 feet away, and I was like, oh, man, Verse is probably about to dominate right here. And I guess I shouldn't have thought that, because off the snap, I mean, Bell just drives Verse back, nearly puts him on his back, and just the whole offense, the offensive line, the tight ends over there just exploding with celebration. And I mean, that kind of created an energy that went on for the rest of practice, because right after that was the last rep of that drill. They went into team drills there kind of like at the red zone, and the offense and defense were just going at it. So it made for a really competitive and fun practice. Like I said earlier, I think the chippiness can be a really good thing for Florida State, as long as it doesn't get escalated to, a level that's too far. And Mike Norvell kind of echoed the same thing after practice. He likes some of that chippiness, but at the same time, he doesn't want it to get too far once the whistle is blown. So overall, I mean, despite the rain and everything, very physical, competitive practice for Florida State. And I think it just shows the quality of practices that they've been putting together, since spring practice began earlier this month.
I love it. I love it. Starting to not like each other when you're hitting the same dude over and over again, same uniform. You're ready to hit someone that is not in the same garnet and gold or white, whatever you're wearing. It gets old after a while. So that's going to happen. I think it also creates a lot of respect from Jared Verse to Jaheim Bell and vice versa. Those guys, standout athletes, we know that, and some big size dudes, but that's what you hope for. You got a guy coming from the SEC, that size and caliber, tight end, going against Jared Verse. You already know what he is, monster like. Sign me up. I mean, I'd pay for it. I'd pay to watch some more of that. But
yeah, Mike Norvell and the coaches, I'm pretty sure they absolutely love that, because not many people can walk up, get down, and challenge Jared Verse like that.
Nope, there hasn't been a lot of them. There has not been a lot of them. But let's go to Jared Verse too. What have you seen from him, Dustin? Because I keep reading and keep hearing, getting texts, Jared Verse looking damn good. And I think it's because he's fully healthy again. That's got to be it, because, we would see little teeny tiny flashes after his injury. But whenever I saw that brace off to start off spring camp, I was like, oh, you are in trouble, whichever offensive lineman you're in, because he's trying to get better, man. He wants to be a top 10 pick next season, and there's a reason why he came back. He's not here to play around, and we know that in practices. and in games, but to see him take it to that next level, like you were saying earlier in the show, Dustin, that's scary for college football and opponents in the ACC.
Yeah, I think being being fully healthy is something that has definitely helped him out. But he also came back to Florida State, instead of going to the NFL where he could be making millions of dollars in about a month, he decided to come back to FSU to push himself a level further to guarantee being a first round pick. And with that has come a renewed focus, I feel like, on technique and fundamentals. He's had a taste now of going through an ACC schedule, playing FBS football, playing against SEC teams, LSU, Florida. He has a taste. He knows what to expect in 2023 out of Florida State's schedule. I think that's another thing that's going to help him through his preparation as he prepares to play even more snaps than he did a year ago. He's been a freak so far during practices. Just yesterday, absolutely outside of that rep against Jaheim Bell, he pretty much dominated that practice. A couple times just got right through Darius Washington like it was nothing, and it's been very impressive to see, to say the least.
One guy that also had a big day, we were talking about him earlier when Pokey was on here with us, but Kentron Portier, I was reading, had a really nice grab. The best grab might have been one of his best practices, if not his best, since arriving at Florida State. Man, if Kentron could get things clicking inside this offense, Mike Norvell really likes him. He puts him in some good opportunities inside that offense, and I think J-Trav likes going to him quite a bit. But Kentron, to me, I think is, if I'm looking at physical size, stature, and everything, he looks like an NFL wide receiver, in my opinion. He's kind of, I don't want to say just something that just came up to me like almost the physical build of like a Mike Evans almost. He's just got the size to him that whenever you're up near him, you're like, damn, this is a big boy at the wide receiver that you can put on the outside. You put him inside. That's just kind of what you could do with Portier.
He's a playmaker. When you look at it last year, I believe he averaged the most yards per reception for Florida State in 2022. I mean, this was a guy, whenever a quarterback was looking deep, they were more often than not targeting Kentron or Johnny Wilson or a guy like that who, when you look at Kentron, all of 6'4", over 200 pounds, he's really started to figure out how to use that frame and make it an advantage against smaller defensive backs. I mean, even yesterday, the catch that he made over AZ, who's, a legit 6'1", maybe even pushing 6'2", not a small cornerback, but Kentron skied up. I mean, it was an NFL catch. There was a bunch of recruits out there and high school coaches and everything. And I always like to, whenever they have the practices inside, this happened during one-on-ones, Logan knows, I like to go down there, stand in the corner right there and get a really good picture of it right in front of the guys and where the reps are happening. So Kentron right in front of me, I mean, just skies over AZ and makes just a crazy catch. And I was like, man, was that a good catch? And I looked to my right and like 5 high school recruits are just sitting there, mouths wide open. and I look over at the Jumbotron to get the replay. I mean, man, just an absolutely insane play from Tron. So if he can continue to do that over the back half of camp, I think Florida State, you got to really like what you have in that wide receiver room. Not only with some of the guys coming back that really proved themselves last year, like Johnny Wilson, but a guy like him and Darion and, Winston Wright getting involved after he wasn't able to play last year. A ton of potential in that wide receiver room. And I'm not even talking about Dre Jacobs in that sentence.
About to say, they can just start calling that Jumbotron the Kentron. I mean, why not? If he keeps on making those plays.
We call him Jumbotron. He's going to jump that damn high to make a catch. I mean,
yeah, no, we see it a ton during practices. I just want to see him fully healthy. If he's fully healthy, then he's going to be probably one of Florida State's biggest breakout guys that not a lot of people talk about, at least in the fan base. They don't really talk about him as much. There's a lot of other names in that room that impressed last year, but Kentron could be someone that could literally explode in front of this fan base and Doak this next year. So we just got to see him stay healthy. I want to mention, too, a few players. Let's start with Ayobami Tafase. He shows up to practice wearing 91, him and Braden Fisk. I guess Ayo had to hand off the jersey and give it to Fisk. I don't know if that was in the transfer contract for Fisk, because now it feels like college football is like NFL now. Maybe something was worked out there to get that jersey number, but Io's wearing Robert Cooper's old number in 91. But good to see Ayobami Tafasi first off back at practices. Didn't get to see him in the early parts of spring, but size wise, you never get disappointed, but it's just depending if he's going to allow himself to, learn and get better, be coachable and everything around that. But seemed like he had a few flashes here and there on Tuesday, D-Lou.
It was funny because I actually asked one of the Florida State SIDs today about him being in 91, and they promptly informed me that that happened in January. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe I'm not as detail-oriented as I thought that I am in my day-to-day life. So that actually happened about 3 months ago, Logan. But, yeah, Tafasi showed a couple signs yesterday, especially during one-on-ones. I mean, he was able to put Casey Roddick on his back. So, I mean, you're still seeing the raw power there, and now it's just about the technique and, I mean, working your way up that depth chart that has so many talented guys in it. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I want to end it off here, too, with a guy that we saw have strides throughout really fall, in my opinion, was Daniel Lyons.
Yep.
He's gonna be a problem eventually. I mean, he might be one in 2023. Might get a little real good sneak peek. He got playing time in 2022, D-Lou, but just watching practices, a guy that does really well in one-on-ones, going against about anybody. Odell Higgins has a youngster with a lot of firepower behind him.
Yep, and he was another guy that was getting a lot of love yesterday. Doing some team drills down there on the goal line. I think the offense was on the 1 or 2 yard line and trying to just run up the middle, get a touchdown. Daniel Lyon just pops right through the offensive guard and lays out a running back for, I think, a 4-yard loss. And the offense had to end up, I believe, settling for a field goal on that particular drive. And at the beginning of the practice, Logan, you know how they kind of start off with 2-minute offense / like a tempo drill where they really just try to go as fast as they possibly can down the field. And he was getting a ton of pressure on Jordan Travis. Last play of the drive, J-Trav went deep, but I mean, the pocket was wide open. And if it was a game, Lions might have broke Jordan Travis's ribs. I mean, he was right there to deliver an absolute kill shot on Travis, but green jersey.
And this raises a great conversation on YouTube asking which offensive lineman has stood out during spring camp, because obviously FSU fans do not want to hear about a defensive line coming in to absolutely shatter their star Heisman-esque hopeful quarterback with Jordan Travis. Someone's got to be there, hopefully, to start blocking these guys. But who has maybe stood out to you? I was reading, Austin, something I do, to our wonderful editor-in-chief. We don't want to give him too much praise, Austin. I will agree with you on that. He gets a little too much. But reading from his observations piece about Keandre Jones being more hands-on, being a leader, which I think is great for a transfer to show that kind of attitude and mental coming into a program like Florida State to have that. Mm-hmm. But who has stood out to you, D-Lou, with this question about the offensive line standing out during spring camp?
I would really say all 3 of the transfers have done different things to separate themselves so far. Tuesday wasn't the best day for Casey Roddick. He was getting a little bit more time at center, and at times there were some snapping issues there. But whenever we've seen him working at guard, I mean, I've been really impressed for him to be able to move at that size, especially when Florida State runs screens and things like that. He's one of the guys that's getting out there, getting the body on a DB or linebacker in space, and that's a coveted attribute, I feel like, for an offensive lineman. Jeremiah Byer is probably the most physically imposing guy so far, and he's had some really fun battles with Jared Verse as well as some of the other defensive ends. I think he might end up being Florida State's best offensive lineman in 2023. I'm comfortable saying that as of right now. And then Jones, some flashes there as well. But like you said, it really impressed me. A guy who's yesterday was his 7th practice at Florida State. And during one of those individual drills where the offensive line was working by itself, we had players stepping up and doing reps of a certain drill. I mean, I can't really get into a ton of detail about it, but there was one player, a younger player on the roster, who was struggling to do the drill correctly, and Coach Atkins was having the player do it again and again. He wanted to get a quality rep out of there. And then Keandre Jones, unprompted, stepped from the back of the group and came up and got next to the player and kind of demonstrated the footwork, the hand movement that Coach Atkins was looking for. And then, I mean, it didn't happen on the next rep, but I believe the rep after that, the younger player finally got it and, did something that satisfied Coach Atkins. But it was just really impressive for me. The guy who just got here a couple of months ago, transferred from Auburn, who's still learning this system himself, to be able to step up and do that says a lot about his character and his comfortability so far at Florida State.
One last thing. Anthony's asking here on YouTube, how are y'all feeling about the safeties? And I noted on here too, with Shyheim Brown starting to get back fully healthy, he's able to participate and to his caliber that he wants to, because, I think very highly of Shyheim Brown. I think it's going to be a guy that will be a starter for Florida State. He will start for Florida State in 2023. Put it down now. Hot takes. I don't even know if it's a hot take or a bold take. I think Shyheim Brown's too special to take off that field. Definitely with what Jamie was telling us last month on the podcast, but specifically him coming back into practices now we've got some good competition brewing right here, because Akeem Dent, you've got Amarion Cooper, who Norvell has talked highly of, transitioning from that cornerback spot over to safety, which is big. And then you've got Travis J. So you've got 4 guys. Who's going to be your starters? And I think it's Shyheim Brown and whoever's going to compete to be the next one, or whoever fits that scheme better. But nonetheless, you're going to have to pick 2 out of those 4. Now I think that safety discussion is going to ramp up now that Shyheim's back in that rotation.
They're getting better and better. I feel like the consistency has been coming on a little bit stronger since the team returned from spring break. Yesterday was probably Shyheim Brown's most active day so far, making plays and one-on-ones and 7-on-7 and team. Wherever the ball was, he was getting around it and being a little chippy too, to say the least. And, Cooper, I feel like he's handling that transition to safety pretty well. Another guy who's gotten better as of late. The true freshman, KJ Kirkland, has really been flashing a lot. I've been impressed with him early in spring practice. And, remember Akeem Dent, Mike Norvell spoke about him after tour of duty and mentioned he was working his way back from a foot injury. So I think he's still trying to get to 100%. But, I mean, we all know the type of football that Akeem Dent has provided Florida State over the last couple of years. So I feel like, at the very least, if he doesn't earn a starting role, he's someone that's going to play still a huge role in that backfield for Florida State, maybe like Shyheim Brown did a year ago. But, I mean, we'll see how that goes. A lot of talent there. Travis J has been making some plays. So, I mean, it's just tough to see. It's just tough to kind of see the full picture at this moment. But, I mean, a really competitive battle between those guys at this point.
Well, VZ, you get to end us off here on some basketball. I can name off the pro day guys real quick if we want to. I don't think we need to jump into a discussion on it, but
why not?
On Friday, we can Yeah. So Florida State's going to hold their pro day Friday morning. D-Lou, did you say that you were going to be there for that? So you can give us some awesome analysis.
Me and Tommy will be at pro day, and I'm planning to be at the pre-pro day tomorrow, where we get to talk to all of these fine gentlemen.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of those being our former Hear the Spear guest, Jamie Robinson.
Multiple former guests.
Yeah. Our former Hear the Spear guest. Loyal one too. Jamie Robinson. We'll also be hearing from Dylan Gibbons, Robert Cooper, Cam McDonald, former loyal Hear the Spear guest. Ontaria Wilson, former loyal guest, Hear the Spear guest. Starting to kind of build a list here. I'm liking this. We got Jarquez McLellan, Wyatt Rector, Jasmine Turnentine, Leonard Warner, and we've got on walk-on wide receiver Mike Russos. Did I say that last name correctly, everybody? I don't know. I don't even know if even the people in the comments will be able to tell me. So, can't tell me what it is, what's not.
Pronunciation guide for you.
Yeah, we might. Yeah, you find that for us. I'm sure we really need to dive into that to figure that out. Just real quick, I think guys that should try to have a big big pro day since they didn't get to go to the NFL Combine. I think Dylan Gibbons is one of those guys who I think is going to get an opportunity after the draft is over, and he's going to have an opportunities to pick between a few teams, in my opinion, depending on where he wants to go and such. But I think his consistency, leadership off the field, you add on being able to stay on the field this last season too, leadership capabilities. If he has a good pro day and things mix in well and he's able to talk to some more scouts and such, coaches, yada, 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 I think he's going to have a lot of good opportunities there for him. And I think guy that we just had on here, Ontaria Wilson, showing his speed on Friday should be very fun. Dustin, I wouldn't even try doing a stopwatch for him. I don't know how fast that's going to be, but I'm seriously thinking Ontaria Wilson could be in those like the low 4.4s. I think he's like probably mid 4.4s, but he's going to have a good 4.4 time, in my opinion. I just think Dylan Gibbons, Ontaria Wilson, and maybe even Cam McDonald, those three guys need to have, I think they have the most potential, and I think an NFL team could really utilize their talents. I think Gibbons is a guy that a system he could stick around with the team for a while, just of, a lot of different things, a lot of things that he could bring to a team. But that's my analysis. Jamie, I think he's fine. He told me
he's going to get drafted.
Yeah, he's going to get drafted and do his thing, but he doesn't need to do much more. I just want him to stay healthy.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I would add Robert Cooper to the mix as well, as someone that could get a shot as an undrafted free agent. And then, I mean, maybe this maybe sounds crazy to you guys, but maybe Wyatt Rector. I mean, look at what he did on special teams at Florida State. That's a huge thing in the NFL with only 53 active players on rosters. I mean, you're looking for, outside of your top stars, most guys on the roster are contributing to a special teams unit or multiple units. And I mean, that could be huge for someone like him who had a lot of success there for Florida State in 22. And then Jason Turnitine, maybe a guy who has NFL size. We'll see how he's doing after that injury he suffered back during the Cheez-It Bowl.
I'm hoping Jamie can use this pro day as a chance to solidify him being a day 2 pick. I think we all think he will be, but he did really well at the combine. Just hope he can keep doing well in these pro days and in the interviews. To your point about Gibbons, that's a guy that's going to do really well in interviews, and he was arguably Florida State's most consistent lineman these last couple of seasons. So you'd like to see him get a shot in the later rounds, but I do agree, Logan. I think he's going to be a guy that ends up going undrafted, but has his pick of where to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's jump into some basketball. VZ, I know transfer portal is now massive, and this time Leonard Hamilton has no arguing about it anymore. I mean, they've got to figure out something here, and you got to start like an NIL, Leonard. You got to start doing it during your last season. I mean, he could have some more seasons, but gotta get with the ways, my man. Got to get with them.
It's the transfer portal is huge. I think there's 1,200 players in the portal right now, and not a single one has entered from Florida State side, which I think is the most surprising thing. You'd expect after a 9-23 season that a few guys would enter the portal. We just haven't seen it. Florida State's one of, I think, only 4 ACC teams that doesn't have someone in the portal. It's Florida State, Duke. I forget the other 2. It's just interesting, after this terrible season, you expect someone to go and just hasn't seen it yet. But at the same time, they've contacted numerous amounts of people. I think the list is up to 13 that I put in Discord yesterday. Some notable ones being Temple's Cleve Battle, Delaware's Jameer Nelson Jr., High Point Zach Austin, Arizona State CJ Horn. Those are the kind of 4 I'm keeping my eyes on right now. I know they've had some pretty serious contact with LaSalle's Josh Nickelberry. Me and him talked for a little bit. I have a feeling he's going to be visiting Florida State soon. It seems like their Zoom call went pretty well earlier in the week, but it's a lot quieter on Florida State side than we're expecting, because there's teams out there like Florida and Arkansas and Auburn that are after seemingly every single transfer. And right now, Florida State's just after these 13 guys. It's kind of surprising, but we'll see what happens. To your point, Logan, they're going to have to use NIL seriously, because the guys they have contacted are every big school's after them as well. And it's going to take something serious to convince them to come to Tallahassee after the season Florida State, Leonard, and Hamilton had. Someone have to convince them, and it's not going to be just playing time.
Just where are they going to get the support is my question, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what's on everybody's mind.
Look at how long it took football to really get things up and running.
And, Battle's End's only football right now. That's one of the big things, I think, that if basketball could find a way to take just even a small piece of that pie, it'd be huge. But as of right now, I don't see that happening. But they need it. They desperately need it because right now I think they're just, most of the guys on the team are just getting the local food sponsorships and things like that.
Yeah. Just kind of like the basic stuff. It's just wild to me, 13 scholarship players still on the team after only winning 9 games last season. I guess whenever you're looking at it from your perspective, I know it's kind of hard to make sense of, but if you can put a thought on it for why no one has left Florida State yet, I mean, what do you think is the best reasoning, best answer?
So I know they stayed in Greensboro an extra day after the ACC tournament. Then they get back and it's spring break. So then everybody goes home for the week. So I know they were doing player interviews once they got back, but it's been a week plus since spring break. So at this point, I really do not know. I'm wondering if the coaching staff's waiting to see what the transfer portal develops into, to see what the quality looks like before they start telling guys, yeah, you need to go. But guys need to go. It's there's only so much you can internally improve on a 9-23 season. Some guys got to go, and there's no seniors. The two guys that you thought were going pro, Matthew Cleveland and Bobo Miller, probably didn't do enough this season to go pro. So I think they're likely to stick around at this point. Well, especially I'm more confident in Bobo than I am Cleveland. I really don't know. I don't know why they're waiting so long. I'm sure there's a good reason for it, and maybe by the time this podcast comes out, it's already outdated and someone's entered. But who knows? Really, who knows?
It's tough. A very weird situation for Florida State, especially when you look at how rampant the transfer portal has become. I mean, you would think that a multitude of guys would have entered weeks ago whenever Florida State season ended, like we've seen from other programs. I think you mentioned it before.
I was fully expecting, the loss to Georgia Tech, they're up. I haven't been on since the ACC tournament. That's how long it's been. That loss to Georgia Tech, they're up the entire game and just collapsed in the final minutes. I was fully expecting by the time they got back to the hotel, someone would enter the transfer portal. It just didn't happen. And here we are 3 weeks out. Still haven't heard anything.
It's mind blowing. I don't think there's anything else that you can say about it.
It's messed up.
It's been an interesting offseason, to put it lightly.
Nothing's happened. What do you mean?
That's why it's interesting. It makes no sense.
It's an interesting because nothing's happened.
Yeah, like
anything is entertaining to be easy.
We were expecting all this motion, especially the way Coach Hamilton's been talking in the media. I should have used the transfer portal better. I should have, been better with the construction of this roster, and we're kind of just sitting around.
Yeah, the most interesting thing to happen related to Florida State basketball is probably CY not taking the Temple job.
Well, he was offered it.
And he's at Missouri. He's not at Florida State.
Yeah, he was offered the Temple job. He was named yesterday. It came out he was named a finalist for the Temple job between him and Penn State's assistant coach. I forget his name off the top of my head. I had it and then I lost it.
I don't remember either.
I'm ashamed of myself. But then this afternoon it comes out that he's been offered the job and is expected to make a decision in 24 hours. And then not even, I want to say 20 minutes later, a report came out saying he turned it down because the president of Temple had stepped down. It was interesting, to say the least. It wouldn't be CY's first opportunity. I know some people think it would be, but he was a head coach at his alma mater, Georgia Southern, a while ago before he ended, being an assistant for Florida State and now the associate head coach at Missouri. I was surprised to hear he was a finalist for the Temple job just because he's been Southeast his entire career. I figured if he was going to take a job, he'd take, a job similar to what he had at Georgia Southern or maybe like a USF or something like that. To hear him in the running for Temple and get offered the Temple job was very surprising to me. And I think it's going to work out for him in the best, honestly. He's going to be able to get one more year in Missouri, get one more year of getting those connections in a different part of the region of U.S. that's not Atlanta, where it's where he's made his living.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to benefit him, just get him even more ready for whatever that next head coaching opportunity is.
Well, you know what's funny? The Kennesaw State job just opened up earlier today.
Yeah, that might be too small.
You think?
I mean, Kennesaw State's Atlantic Sun, which, 80% of the people listening don't even know what the ASUN conference is. It's a very, very small conference. It's where Florida Gulf Coast plays in, UNF, Jax, JU.
I was going to say, didn't Florida State
Stetson.
lose to a team in that conference?
Yeah, I mean,
Florida State fans should know who they are.
Yeah, but they know they may know the team. They don't know the conference. Yeah, that might be a little too small. Granted, it is just north of Atlanta, so if he wants to go back home, and coming off the tournament, and coming off a really good experienced team that experienced major turnaround. It was a big story that 4 years ago they won just one game, and here they are in the tournament. Great story. I'm not surprised that coach took a better job, but I think that might be a little too small at school.
They went to USF, so pump the brakes.
I mean, it's more money. Which for a while the USF job was rumored to be Mike Bray, which blew my mind when that rumor came out. I was like, huh?
Well, is that the end for the basketball talk? Because I know that we're exciting people right now.
We're rambling.
We are jumping in views.
It's all I had.
We're skyrocketing. We are skyrocketing.
All this is, if you want the full list of people Florida State's contacted, I put it in Discord. I put it on Twitter yesterday. May make it into an article. We'll see.
Yep. Make sure you guys go tune in to the Discord. I think that's going to wrap it up for this evening, though. Appreciate big time Pokey Wilson joining us on the show. Great interview. Happy to have him on. Wishing him the best of luck going through Pro Day on Friday and then going through everything further, getting himself and bringing his talents into the league. So great interview there. As always, appreciate everybody hopping on here listening to the show. Before you leave, if you're on YouTube right now, if you've stayed this long, hit that like button and let us know that you were hanging with us. Definitely appreciate everyone this evening. As always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Make sure you're tuned everywhere right now. Socials are going wild, so make sure you're following us on everything at Noel Game Day. Everybody, have a great rest of y'all's week. And we will talk to you guys next Wednesday after Florida State wraps up its second scrimmage on Saturday. Peace.